Hi kids, this is Grandpa. I would like to read you the Book of Mormon stories. So if you'll sit back, get comfortable, let's start reading. Book of Mormon stories are a summarized version of, as you might guess, the Book of Mormon. Let's start with 1 Nephi. I am Nephi. There are so many things to record about my days. I was born in a land across the sea. It was called Jerusalem. My father and mother were kindly and good. They loved God and taught me to love Him. Because I loved God and tried to please Him, He pleased me. I learned many things about the earth, the sea and the sky, but most of all I learned how good God is and how wonderful His creations are. My father Lehi taught me how the people of Egypt write and speak. Then he taught me about the learnings of the Jews. When I was young, Zedekiah was the king over the land. The Spirit of the Lord was like the setting sun in our land. And Zedekiah was like the kings before him. His deeds were secret and evil. So the Lord became angry with him and with those who followed him. Zedekiah should have feared what the Lord might do, but his soul was so dark. So the Lord tried to warn him. The Lord was merciful. He sent the great men of God, the prophets, into our land. The prophets stood in the streets and on the walls of Jerusalem, saying to our people, "Love the Lord, stop your evil deeds, or Jerusalem will become destroyed." My father Lehi heard the prophets. He worried what would happen to Jerusalem, so he prayed to the Lord that the people might be saved. He prayed with so much faith that the Lord did a wonderful thing. A pillar of fire came down from the sky to rest on the rock before him. My father heard a great voice and saw many things in the fire. When he came home, he was shaking so much he could hardly speak. My father went by me and threw himself down on his bed. Then his vision came to him. The Spirit of the Lord was still with him. The heavens opened before his eyes. There he saw God sitting on his throne, and around him the angels of heaven were singing and praising him. Then a heavenly being came down a path of light out of heaven. His light was steady and golden, brighter than the luster of the sun. Then behind the heavenly being came 12 others. They were like stars, but brighter. The 12 heavenly beings came down and went forth into the world. But the first came to my father Lehi and stood before him. He was carrying a book that he bade my father to read. You see that picture? The warmth and light of the Spirit of the Lord was with my father as he read the book. It contained another warning of the Lord. It said that Jerusalem would be destroyed because the people would not repent. Soldiers of the east would come from Babylon. The soldiers would kill many with swords and would take our people back to Babylon as slaves and captives. But my father learned that some might be saved. To be saved, the people would have to obey the Lord. My father was pleased when he learned the truth about the vision. He praised God in his happiness. In my prayers, I thanked God for through my Father he had given us comfort and peace. But Jerusalem was to be destroyed. My father Lehi went out to warn the people. He told them that they would be safe only if they would stop doing evil. This made them very angry, so they tried to take his life. But the Lord helped him. The Lord spake to my father Lehi in a dream. He told him to take his family into the wilderness by the edge of the sea. What a wonderful adventure lay ahead of us. We gathered together all the things we needed. We had food and clothing and tents and camels and gold and silver. But we left the gold and silver behind. We did not need that, for the Lord was leading us and we depended on him. So we left our house and went out of the land of Jerusalem as the Lord had commanded. We were frightened, but trusted in the Lord. There were only 6 in our family. There were my father Lehi, my mother Sarah, my older brothers Laman and Lemuel and Sam, and myself. I was the youngest. Together we traveled down to the Red Sea. After traveling for 3 days, we pitched our tents in a valley by the river, and we stayed there resting and praying. We were happy because we were safe and free. My father gathered some stones and built an altar to the Lord. When he completed the altar, he made an offering of thanks unto the Lord. My father named the river Laman and the valley Lemuel after my brothers. Because the waters of the river ran into the Red Sea, he said that Laman, oh, that you might be like unto this river, continually running into the fountain of all righteousness. Then he spake to Laman, oh, that ye might be like unto the valley, firm and steadfast and immovable, in keeping the commandments of the Lord. My father loved my brothers, Laman and Lemuel, but they thought that he was simply a visionary man. They talked against him because he led us away from the land of Jerusalem and because he left the gold and silver and all our precious things. Laman and Lemuel murmured against our father because they did not understand their God. Neither did they believe that Jerusalem, the great city, could be destroyed according to the words of the prophets. They became like the people of Jerusalem, who had mocked our father Lehi. But the Spirit of the Lord helped our father and inspired him to inspired him to speak to Laman and Lemuel as a man of God. They began to shake and tremble and stop talking. The voice of the Father made them afraid to say anything more. I, Nephi, was very young, but large for my age. I wanted to know much more about God and His ways, so I prayed to Him. The Lord visited me and assured me of the truth of the words of my father Lehi. I would not rebel as did my brothers, but did believe my father and honor him. I told Sam of the things the Lord had revealed to me by the Holy Spirit, and he believed me, but Laman and Lemuel scoffed and would not listen to me. I was afraid for Laman and Lemuel because they did not believe. So I prayed unto the Lord for them. He answered, if my brothers rebel against you, they shall be cut off from my presence. The Lord said that if they did not keep His commandments, they would be cursed. If they were cursed, I would become their ruler and teacher. The father said, "Blessed are you, Nephi, because of your faith. For you have sought me diligently with lowliness of heart. For those who keep my commandments shall prosper." The Lord then told me about the wonderful land that he had prepared for us, a land choice above all other lands. But where could such a land be found? I returned. Did I skip a page? Nope. I returned from speaking with the Lord and went to the tent of my father. He told me of a dream he had had in which the Lord told him that he must send his sons back to Jerusalem to get the brass plates of Laban, on which was recorded the history of our forefathers and also the recordings of the Jews. This, my brothers complained, was a difficult task that my father required of us. I replied that our father did not give it unto us, but that it was a commandment of the Lord. Therefore I did not murmur, as did my brothers. I told my father I would go, and that I would always obey the Lord's commandments. For I know that the Lord giveth no commandments unto the children of men, save he shall prepare a way for them, that they may accomplish the thing which he hath commanded them. So my brothers and I took our tents and started back through the wilderness to Jerusalem. When we arrived in Jerusalem, we made plans on how to get the brass plates of Laban. We cast lots to see who would go to the house of Laban. The lot fell on Laban. Entering Jerusalem, Laban went to the house of Laban. He asked Laban for the engraved plates of brass which contained the record of our father's family. Laban, also a descendant of Joseph, had kept the records of their genealogy, as had his father before him. But when Laban asked for the plates of brass, Laban became angry, calling my brother a robber, and threatening to take Laban's life. But Laban got away and returned to us, and told us of the things which Laban had said. We had failed. Oops. My brothers wanted to return to our father in the wilderness without the plates, but I reminded them that the Lord had commanded us to get them. And he would show us a way only if we would try. Our father Lehi had been commanded to flee into Jerusalem. Then it was wisdom in God that we should obtain the records, that we might preserve for our children and their children's children the words spoken by the holy prophets. After talking to my brothers, I persuaded them to obey the wishes of our father, and also to be faithful in carrying out the commandments of God. I asked my brothers to go back to our house to get the gold and silver and precious things that we had left behind, hoping that we might exchange them for the plates. After gathering together these things, we set out for Laban's house again. Spreading out our riches before him, we asked that we might trade them for the plates. When Laban saw our property, that it was exceedingly great, he desired our riches, but would not give up the plates. With the aid of the servants of Laban drove us from his house. We fled for our lives, leaving our riches. We fled into the wilderness, and the servants of the Lord did not overtake us. My brothers and I hid in the cavity of a rock that we had fortunately come upon. Laban and Lemuel became angry with me. They were also angry with our father for sending us to Jerusalem to deal with Laban. They shouted at Sam and me and told us that we were wrong to follow the commandments of the Lord. Then they began to beat us. While they were beating us, an angel of the Lord appeared. The angel inquired, "Why are you beating your younger brother? Do you not know that Nephi has been chosen by the Lord to rule over you because you have disobeyed the commandments of God?" Then he told us to go back to Jerusalem. He promised us that the Lord would deliver Laban into our hands. When the angel had gone, Laban and Lemuel began to complain again, saying, "How can we overcome Laban? He is a mighty man, and he can command 50, yea, even slay 50. I spoke to my brothers again, saying, "You have seen an angel, and have heard him speak. How can ye doubt? Is the Lord not mightier than Laban and his 50? Now let us go and do the Lord's work." But my brothers were still worried. They complained and argued, and they followed me to the walls of Jerusalem. I decided to go to the house of Laban myself. I told them to stay outside the walls until I returned. In the night I crept into the city to the house of Laban. I decided to put myself in the hands of the Lord. Because I did not know what to do next, he led me. As I came near the house of Laban, I saw a man lying on the ground drunken with wine. When I came closer, I saw it was Laban. His sword was by his side. I took his sword in my hand. The hilt was pure gold, and the blade was made of the finest steel I had ever seen. I, Nephi, had never before shed the blood of any man. But the Spirit of the Lord said to me, "Slay him, for the Lord hath delivered him into thy hands. It is better that one man perish than that a nation should dwindle and perish in unbelief." I knew what I must do. I remembered the voice of the Lord in the wilderness. I must obey his commandments. So I slew Laban. But now, how could I get inside his house? Having slain Laban with his own sword, I removed the garments from Laban and dressed myself in them. I fastened on his armor and girded his sword to my side. The armor was heavy and cumbersome. Disguised as Laban, I set out for his house. Very carefully, I went to the treasury where Laban kept his precious things. One of Laban's servants was there with the key to the treasury. Knowing how Laban spoke, I used his voice. Hoping the servants would think I was Laban, I commanded him to take me to the treasury. When he did, I knew the Lord was guiding me. I spake as Laban again. I told the servant that I should carry the plates of brass to my elder brothers outside the walls. I also told him that he should go with me, supposing that I spoke of the brethren of the church. The servant did everything I said. He followed me. When my brothers saw me, they too thought I was Laban, so they ran off. They thought that Laban had killed me and that he now wanted to kill them. I called after them because they knew my voice. They stopped. Upon seeing my brothers and hearing that I was Nephi, Zoram, the servant of Laban, began to tremble. The servant tried to flee from us, but being large in stature and strengthened by the will of God, I seized him so that he could not go back to Jerusalem. I told Zoram that we would not harm him, and that he could go with us into the wilderness. My father would welcome him, and he could live with us. We did not want him to go back to Jerusalem, for we feared that he might tell the Jews where we had gone. If he did, the Jews would have pursued us and destroyed us. So he decided he would go with us and help us. As was the custom of our people, Zoram made a solemn promise, or an oath, to be loyal to us, and we promised his freedom. Again, we left Jerusalem, this time with the records that the Lord had commanded us to get. How happy we felt as we journeyed back into the tent of our father Lehi. In our absence, my mother Sarah had worried deeply about us. She thought we had perished in the wilderness. She complained to our father and told him he was a visionary man, for he had led our family away from our home in Jerusalem and had sent her sons on an errand from which she believed we would not return. Upon the return from our successful journey, our mother and father came to meet us. They were very happy. We were away so long that they thought that we had died in the wilderness, or that Laban had killed us. After our mother saw we had returned safely, she knew that the Lord was leading our family, and that he had really appeared to her husband. She also knew that the Lord had helped her sons obey the commandments. Our father and mother were so happy that they went to the altar and prayed. They thanked the Lord for his blessings and offered burnt offerings to him. And after they had given thanks unto the God of Israel, my father Lehi took the records which were engraved upon the plates of brass. My father Lehi took the plates up carefully and read what was carved on them. He saw that they contained the 5 books of the great leader and prophet of our people, Moses. The books told of the creation of the world. They also told of Adam and Eve, the father and mother of mankind. And then my father read the records of the Jews from the beginning down to the reign of Zedekiah, king of the Judea. Then he read the prophecies of the prophets of God, the beginning down to the reign of Zedekiah. All these things, including some prophecies of Jeremiah, were written on the plates now in our possession. The Lord had favored our father and his family. Lehi read about his forefathers. He told us that Joseph and Jacob of old were among them. The Lord had saved them and had led them out of the land of Egypt. And it was the same Lord who had saved and helped us. To have a record of our fathers made Lehi very happy. The Spirit of the Lord came to him, and he began to prophesy. He said that the knowledge of the brass plates would be taken to all nations, kindreds, tongue, and people who belonged to his great family. These plates should not wear away or become dull with time. He prophesied many things about his descendants. The Lord knew that the sons of Lehi would need wives and families to people the new land. So he, through my father, the Lord commanded that I, Nephi, and my brothers should go back to Jerusalem once more to find Ishmael and his family. It was the Lord's will that Ishmael and his family be one with ours, to raise families in the land of promise. So my brothers and I returned to the land of Jerusalem to visit Ishmael. Arriving at the house of Ishmael in Jerusalem, we told him that the Lord had said, Ishmael and his household, their hearts... We told him what the Lord had said. Ishmael and his household, their hearts softened by the word of the Lord, agreed to join with my family in the wilderness. Ishmael and his family gathered their possessions and left with us. Our caravan had not traveled far when a quarrel began. Laman and Lemuel, two of the daughters of Ishmael, and two of the sons of Ishmael and their families, rebelled against Sam, Ishmael, and his wife, Ishmael's other 3 daughters, and myself. All those against us wanted to return to the land of Jerusalem. I spoke to those who rebelled against us, reminding them that the Lord had commanded us to go into the wilderness. I also reminded Laman and Lemuel that they had seen an angel of God. How could they forget the angel's words? How could they forget that the Lord had done great things for us and had delivered Laban into our hands? Did they not remember that their father had been driven out of the land of Jerusalem? When I had spoken these words to my brethren, they became very angry with me. Blinded by their anger, they subdued me. They bound me with cords. Then they sought to take away my life. They wanted me left in the wilderness to be devoured by wild beasts. I prayed to the Lord with all my faith, asking him to deliver me from the hands of my brethren. I said, "O Lord, give me strength to break these bands." When I had said these words, the cords suddenly loosened from my hands and feet. I spoke to my brothers again, but they became more angry. One of the daughters of Ishmael, her mother, and one of the sons of Ishmael pleaded with my brothers. As they spoke, the hearts of Laman and Lemuel softened. My brothers felt their wickedness and bowed down before me. Then they pleaded with me for my forgiveness for all they had done. I, Nephi, forgave them, asking them to pray to the Lord their God for forgiveness. Continuing our journey, we finally entered the valley of Lemuel beside the river Laman. We went to the tents of our father. Our father Lehi and mother Sarah were exceedingly joyful that we had returned. Now that Ishmael's family had joined ours in the wilderness, my father arranged a sacrifice and burnt offerings to give thanks to the Lord our God. And that is the end of Volume 1, the illustrated stories of the Book of Mormon. If I didn't say so earlier, these were produced by, I shall tell you really quick. Published by Promised Land Publications. Thank you, Promised Land.